You should be afraid, she said. I am, he replied, not of you, of what I'll do. Max awoke to the sharp scent of burning metal. His eyes snapped open, and for a moment all he could see was smoke. The ship had crashed. The massive vessel, which had once been a beacon of humanity's ambitions, now lay scattered across an alien landscape, half buried in the dirt and rock. He groaned, his body aching from the impact. His fingers twitched as he slowly reached for the emergency beacon. No response. He cursed under his breath, trying to remember the protocol. There was no time to waste. He had to get out. The alien world outside was a strange sight. The sky was tinted with an unnatural purple hue, and massive trees stretched to impossible heights, their thick trunks disappearing into a thick, misty canopy. Every now and then he could hear something large moving in the distance, but he knew better than to investigate. Survival came first. Max carefully stepped out of the wreckage, squinting against the dim light. His gear was scattered around him, mostly destroyed. He quickly gathered what little he could, a knife, a few supplies, and a pistol. He had trained for this. He was a soldier, a survivor. No matter how far away Earth seemed, he was determined to make it through. It didn't take long for him to notice something strange. The sounds of movement weren't just animals. There was something else, something, watching him. He turned around, scanning the area, but saw nothing. His heart beat a little faster. He wasn't alone. Max wasn't one to panic, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. His instincts kicked in. He needed to find shelter. A few hundred yards away, he spotted a large structure. It looked like an ancient temple, its stone walls covered in strange symbols. That might be his best bet. He began to move cautiously, stepping lightly on the forest floor. He had no idea what kind of creatures called this planet home, but he wasn't taking any chances. As he approached the structure, the sense of being watched grew stronger. His hand tightened around the handle of his knife. He wasn't going to let anyone or anything catch him off guard. When he reached the temple, he found a small gap between the stones. It was just big enough for him to slip through. He took a deep breath and squeezed into the narrow opening, hoping it would lead to safety. Inside was cool and dark, a stark contrast to the sweltering heat outside. His eyes adjusted, and he found himself in a large, open chamber. It was empty, at least he thought it was. He walked further into the room, his footsteps echoing on the stone floor. Suddenly a voice rang out. "You should be afraid." Max froze, his body tensing. He turned toward the voice, but there was no one there. The room was empty except for the shadows that stretched across the walls. He heard the voice again, this time clearer. "You should be afraid," it repeated, though it wasn't an accusation, more like a warning. Max's heart skipped a beat. He had heard strange things in his time as a soldier, but this was something else. He had to know who was speaking, who or what was watching him. The voice was soft, but it held power, an authority he couldn't quite place. "I am afraid," Max replied, his voice steady. He had faced death more times than he could count, and fear was something he had learned to suppress. But the voice was different. It wasn't like the fear of a battlefield or the fear of an unknown enemy. This was something deeper, something personal. "Not of me," the voice said, and it felt as though it was moving closer. Max instinctively reached for the gun at his side, but before he could draw it, the voice came again. "Of what you'll do." Max's eyes widened, his pulse quickening. The words hung in the air, thick with meaning. It was as if the very planet had just spoken to him. But how? And why? The sound of footsteps echoed from the shadows, soft at first, then louder, as if something was coming closer. The presence behind the voice was undeniable now. It wasn't just in his mind. He could feel it in the air, like a storm brewing on the horizon. A figure emerged from the darkness. She was tall, impossibly so, and cloaked in armor that shimmered like liquid metal. Her features were sharp, regal, her eyes a piercing, otherworldly shade of violet. Max's breath caught in his throat. He had expected danger, but not this. The woman in front of him wasn't like anything he had encountered before. She was alien in the truest sense of the word. Her presence was overwhelming, almost suffocating. "You're the one who spoke," Max said, his voice a mix of awe and caution. "Who are you?" The woman didn't respond right away. Instead, she tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him feel small, vulnerable. It was as though she was sizing him up, assessing whether he was worthy of her attention. Finally, she spoke. "I am Elira. And you are a human stranded on my world. What do you think you'll do next, Max?" Max blinked, taken aback. How did she know his name? He hadn't told her, but there was no time to question it. He couldn't afford to show weakness. "I'll survive," he said firmly. "And I'll find a way off this planet." Elira smiled, a chilling expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Survival? Yes, that is your only choice, isn't it? But how far will you go to survive? How far will you push yourself, your body, your mind, your soul?" Max's fingers twitched. She was toying with him. He wasn't some frightened civilian. He had fought wars, faced death more times than he could count. But there was something about Elira that made him hesitate. Something in the way she spoke, in the way she looked at him. "I'm not afraid of you," Max said, his voice unwavering, though he wasn't sure if he truly believed the words. "I'm afraid of what I'll do." Elira took a step closer, and for the first time, Max felt a real sense of fear. Not for her, he could handle her, but for himself and the dark places he had been before. He had a feeling this encounter would push him further than he'd ever gone before. "Then you are afraid of the right thing," Elira said softly. "And that fear will keep you alive, but it won't be enough, not on this planet." "Not with me." Max swallowed, his heart pounding in his chest. The game had just begun, and already he could feel the stakes rising higher than he had ever imagined. Max didn't have the luxury of time to process everything. The reality of his situation had just hit him full force, and he needed to act. Elira stood before him, a living embodiment of the alien world he had crash-landed on, her presence both magnetic and intimidating. The way she moved, the way her eyes studied him, it was as though she could see right through him. He had faced many dangers in his life, but none like this. This was not a typical fight for survival. This was something far more complex, a test of will, strength, and survival in ways he had never imagined. "You have two choices," Elira said, her voice calm, almost soothing. "You can continue to cower here in the shadows, waiting for the planet to consume you, or you can face me and prove that you are worthy of living." Max didn't flinch. The words cut through him like a blade, but they didn't make him retreat. He wasn't one to back down. He knew the way of the world, or at least the way of the battlefield. In a fight, survival wasn't always about strength. It was about adaptability, quick thinking, and knowing when to strike. "I'll face you," Max said, his voice steady, "but I won't beg for my life." Elira's expression softened slightly. A hint of amusement flickered in her eyes, as if she had expected something different. "I'm not asking you to beg, I'm asking you to prove yourself." She extended her hand, as though offering a challenge. "Survive this and I will see your worth. Fail and you'll be forgotten, just another human casualty." Max stood tall, pushing aside the surge of doubt that threatened to rise within him. He could sense the weight of her words, but he wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of failing, of being nothing more than a passing story. He would not let that happen. He stepped forward, his movements calculated, ready for whatever lay ahead. Elira watched him, her gaze intense, unwavering. "Follow me," she said, turning away and heading deeper into the temple. Max followed her through a series of corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. The walls were adorned with strange carvings, and the air felt thick, as if the place itself held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Despite the chill in the air, Max could feel the heat of anticipation building within him. What had he gotten himself into? What was Elira truly after? They reached a large, open chamber, the ceiling lost in shadow. Elira moved to the center of the room and turned to face him. "This is where you will prove your strength," she said. "You will face the trials of this world. You will be tested in ways you cannot predict. The forest, the creatures, the very ground beneath your feet, they are all your enemies now, and I will be watching." Max nodded, determination settling in his chest. He didn't need to know the details. All he needed was to survive. He had always been a fighter, even when the odds seemed impossible. This would be no different. Without warning, Elira gestured, and the ground beneath them began to shift. The stone floor trembled, and a crack appeared, splitting the earth between them. A low growl echoed from the depths, and Max's eyes widened as a massive creature emerged from the shadows. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its body was covered in thick, armored plating, and its eyes glowed with a predatory hunger. The creature snarled, revealing rows of sharp teeth, and lunged at him with terrifying speed. Max reacted instinctively, rolling to the side just in time to avoid the creature's charge. He barely had time to think as the creature turned toward him again, its massive jaws snapping shut with a deafening roar. Elira's voice broke through the chaos. "You can't run forever, human. Fight back." Max scrambled to his feet, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The creature's claws scraped against the stone floor as it lunged again, but this time Max was ready. He dodged to the side, his mind working quickly. He needed a plan, a way to take down this creature before it overwhelmed him. He spotted a large rock nearby, jagged and sharp. It was his only chance. He grabbed it and hurled it at the creature's face. The rock struck with a satisfying thud, causing the creature to stumble back, momentarily disoriented. Max wasted no time, rushing forward and using his momentum to drive his knife into the creature's exposed underbelly. The beast let out a piercing scream, thrashing violently, but Max held his ground. He twisted the blade, going for the heart. The creature's body jerked once, then fell still, blood pooling around it. Max stood panting, his body shaking from the effort. He wiped sweat from his brow and turned to Elira, who had watched the entire fight in silence. Her expression remained unreadable, but Max could sense the approval in her gaze. "You've done well," she said, her voice low. "But this is only the beginning. The forest will test you even more. It will not be as easy to survive the next time." Max nodded, not willing to let his guard down. He had proven his worth in this moment, but he knew Elira's words were not empty. This planet was full of dangers, and he had only begun to scratch the surface. As the creature's body began to dissolve into the ground, the earth around them shifted again. The temple doors closed behind them, and the landscape outside began to change. The air grew thick with humidity, and the sky above darkened, signaling the arrival of something far more dangerous than what they had just faced. Elira didn't speak again. Instead, she began to move toward the dense forest in the distance, her silhouette vanishing into the shadows. Max took a deep breath and followed her, ready for whatever came next. The world had just begun to show him its true face. And he was determined to survive it. Max's heart pounded in his chest as he followed Elira into the dense forest. The air was thick and heavy, making each breath feel like it was dragging through the humid atmosphere. His clothes clung to his skin, soaked from the heat and sweat, but he didn't mind. He had been through worse. He had trained his whole life for survival, but nothing could have prepared him for this alien world. Elira moved ahead with ease, her steps sure and swift, as though the forest wasn't a threat to her at all. Max, on the other hand, found every rustling leaf and distant noise a reminder that he wasn't in control here. He had survived the creature in the temple, but this environment was different. It wasn't just the alien creatures. It was the entire ecosystem that seemed to have a mind of its own. There was a sense of danger in the air, thick like a storm waiting to unleash its fury. Max's thoughts were interrupted when he heard a growl, a low, menacing sound from somewhere deep within the trees. His muscles tensed, and his hand instinctively moved toward his knife. Elira didn't flinch, her expression unchanged as she turned toward the sound, as though she had been expecting it. "You will need to be faster," she said quietly. "The forest doesn't give warnings, it takes what it wants." Max didn't have time to respond. From the shadows, something large and fast shot toward them. It was another creature, but this one was different. Its body was sleek and serpentine, with scales that shimmered in the dim light. It had long, slender limbs, each ending in sharp claws, and its eyes, glowing an eerie green, fixed on Max. Without thinking, Max dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's strike. It hissed, its tongue flicking in and out like a serpent. The creature turned quickly, lunging again with incredible speed. Max scrambled backward, his heart racing as he tried to find his footing on the uneven ground. Elira was already moving. She didn't hesitate for a second. She raised her arm, and a blade of light formed from the air around her, solidifying into a long, jagged sword. The weapon was almost too quick to see, flashing through the air in a blur as Elira swung it toward the creature. Max had only a split second to react. He grabbed a nearby branch, swinging it with all his strength at the creature's side. It struck with a sickening crack, but the creature didn't stop. It turned its glowing eyes on him, its mouth snapping open as it hissed in fury. Elira's sword found its mark. With one clean strike, she cleaved through the creature's side, and it let out a deafening scream before collapsing to the ground. Max took a step back, breathing heavily. The creature twitched once, then fell still. "You're lucky," Elira said, her tone almost indifferent as she wiped her sword clean of blood. "The forest tests you. It waits until you are distracted before attacking. If you let your guard down, it will consume you." Max wiped sweat from his brow, trying to steady his breath. "I wasn't distracted." Elira didn't respond. She turned and continued walking, her pace steady and unhurried. Max followed her, more cautious now than ever. He had faced threats before, but this planet, it was something entirely different. It wasn't just the creatures. It was the entire world that seemed to be watching, testing, waiting to see who would survive. As they walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller, their trunks more twisted, their roots thick and gnarled, like the hands of ancient gods reaching up from the earth. The ground was damp beneath their feet, the air heavy with the scent of decay and something floral, strangely sweet, yet sour at the same time. Max could hear the sounds of movement around them. It wasn't just animals this time. He could hear whispers, soft and eerie, carried on the wind. It was like the forest itself was alive, aware of their presence. "Do you hear it?" Elira asked, her voice barely a whisper. Max nodded. "It's like the forest is alive." Elira didn't answer, but he saw a flicker of something in her eyes, something that suggested she knew more about the forest than she was letting on. He didn't ask. He wasn't sure if he wanted to know. Hours passed, and the forest seemed to grow even darker. The trees towered overhead, their branches thick and tangled, blocking out much of the light. Max felt a growing sense of unease, a weight settling on his chest as the shadows seemed to grow longer and darker with every step. Finally, they came to a clearing. In the center stood a massive tree, its trunk wide and thick, with roots that seemed to stretch for miles. The tree glowed faintly, its surface etched with strange symbols that pulsed with light. It was the most beautiful thing Max had ever seen, both eerie and mesmerizing. "This is where it begins," Elira said. She stepped forward, her movements fluid as she approached the tree. "This is the heart of the forest. The test doesn't end with the creatures, it ends here." Max felt a shiver run down his spine. He could sense something in the air, something ancient and powerful emanating from the tree. It was as if the entire forest had been built around it, drawn to its energy. Elira stopped in front of the tree, her face expressionless. She reached out and touched the bark, and the symbols on the tree glowed brighter. Max watched in silence, his heart thudding in his chest. He had no idea what was happening, but he could feel the change in the air, the tension, the electricity. Without warning, the ground beneath them trembled. The tree's roots shifted, twisting and rising from the earth like massive serpents. Max staggered back, his eyes wide. The roots lashed out, wrapping around the clearing, and Max could feel the energy in the air grow stronger, more oppressive. Elira stepped back, her eyes focused on the roots as they continued to twist and shift, moving with a will of their own. "This is the trial," she said, her voice low. "You must survive the forest's embrace. The tree will decide whether you are worthy of leaving." Max's mind raced. He had no idea how to survive this. The forest wasn't just trying to kill him now. It was actively testing him, choosing whether he lived or died based on his ability to adapt. The first root shot toward him, moving faster than he could react. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding it. The roots were everywhere now, whipping through the air, crashing down with immense force. Max scrambled to his feet, trying to keep his balance as the ground beneath him shifted. The tree's energy was pulling at him, urging him to move, to survive. Max's training kicked in. He moved swiftly, dodging and weaving through the roots, using his surroundings to his advantage. But the forest wasn't making it easy. Each movement felt like it took everything he had, as though the ground itself was trying to drag him down. Elira stood off to the side, watching him with an unreadable expression. She didn't help. She didn't offer him any advice. This was his fight and his alone. Max's heart raced as he ducked under a massive root, his body aching from the effort. Sweat poured down his face and he felt exhaustion creeping in. But he couldn't stop. He had to keep moving. He had to prove to Elira and to himself that he wasn't just a survivor. He was more than that. With a final, desperate burst of strength, Max leaped forward, rolling beneath a large root just as it crashed to the ground behind him. He landed in a crouch, breathing heavily. His muscles screamed in protest, but he didn't stop. He had come too far to give up now. The roots around him began to slow, retreating back into the earth. The tree's glow faded and the air cleared. Max stood, his body shaking, covered in dirt and sweat, but alive. Elira approached him slowly, her eyes still unreadable. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze intense. "You've passed," she said simply. Max nodded, wiping his brow. He had done it. He had survived, but as he looked up at the glowing tree, he knew this was only the beginning. The forest had shown him its power, but he had yet to fully understand what it would take to truly survive on this planet. Max was exhausted. His muscles were sore from the trials of the forest, and his mind was clouded with the intensity of what he had just experienced. The weight of the alien planet seemed to press down on him with every step, but he kept moving, driven by a single, unyielding thought: survival. Elira led the way, as calm and composed as ever, her every movement flowing with purpose. She was like a part of this world, as if it had shaped her to be one with the land. Max, on the other hand, felt like an intruder, a human lost in an alien landscape, struggling to adapt to the rhythm of something so much bigger than himself. They walked for what felt like hours, the air thick with the scent of earth and the sounds of creatures he couldn't identify. Max didn't speak. He was still trying to process everything that had happened. He had survived the creature in the temple. He had survived the trials of the forest. But the one thing he couldn't shake was the feeling that he wasn't just surviving anymore. This planet wasn't just testing him, it was challenging him, pushing him to the limits of what he thought was possible. Eventually, they arrived at a small clearing. The trees here were thinner, the ground covered in patches of moss and grass. The air felt cooler, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, Max felt a brief sense of relief, but that relief was short-lived. In the center of the clearing stood something that took Max's breath away. It was a massive stone structure, ancient and worn, covered in vines and moss. It looked like a temple, but it was unlike anything he had ever seen. The stones were carved with intricate patterns, glowing faintly in the dim light of the planet's sun. There was an aura about it, something that felt alive, as if the structure itself had a purpose, a reason for existing. "This is where it ends," Elira said softly, her voice echoing in the stillness. "The trial you've faced so far was only the beginning. What lies ahead will test everything you are." Max looked at her, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Elira stepped forward, her eyes focused on the temple. "Inside, you will find the answers you seek, but be warned, this is no simple task. What you find inside may change everything." Max didn't understand. Answers? What answers? But before he could ask more questions, Elira turned and began walking toward the entrance of the temple. Max hesitated for only a moment before following her, curiosity gnawing at him. What was this place? What did it have to do with the trials he had faced? The temple's entrance was dark, the shadows within swallowing up the light from outside. As they stepped inside, Max's heart rate quickened. The air was cooler here, almost damp, and the walls seemed to close in around them. The space was vast, the ceiling lost in the shadows above. Faint whispers echoed through the air, and Max's skin crawled as if the very structure of the temple was alive, watching him. Elira walked ahead, her movements sure and confident, while Max couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was an oppressive energy in the air, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. This place wasn't just ancient, it was ancient in a way that felt wrong. They passed through long hallways adorned with more of the strange carvings, the patterns glowing faintly, pulsing with an energy that felt almost like a heartbeat. Max's thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of it all. What did these markings mean? Who had built this temple and why was it here? And more importantly, what was Elira's role in all of this? They reached the inner sanctum of the temple. The room was enormous, its walls lined with towering statues of beings that looked both human and alien. Their faces were serene, their bodies adorned with flowing robes and intricate armor. At the center of the room stood a large, circular platform, its surface smooth and polished, and it glowed with the same light as the carvings. Elira stopped at the edge of the platform and turned to face Max. Her expression was unreadable, her eyes fixed on the glowing surface. She didn't speak for a long moment, and Max felt the silence stretch between them like a tangible force. "What is this place?" Max finally asked, his voice low. Elira's gaze shifted to him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "This is the heart of the world. The source of everything you've encountered so far. The power that shapes this planet, that controls everything in its reach. The trials you've faced weren't just tests of survival, they were tests of worth. The worthiness of your kind to live here, to claim a place among the stars." Max frowned. "You're telling me this is some kind of test?" Elira nodded, but there was something in her eyes, something distant, like she wasn't entirely sure of the answers herself. "Not just a test. A judgment. The world has been waiting for this moment, for someone like you." Max stared at her, confusion swirling in his mind. "Someone like me?" "Yes," Elira said. She stepped onto the platform, her feet making no sound as she moved. "The human race." You've come to this planet for a reason, but what that reason is, only you can discover. Max hesitated, but something in Elira's words pushed him forward. The platform seemed to hum with energy, and as he stepped onto it, he felt a wave of power wash over him. It was like nothing he had ever experienced. The energy in the room seemed to reach out and envelop him, swirling around his body, filling his senses with a strange sense of clarity. "Focus," Elira's voice whispered in his ear. "Look within yourself." Max closed his eyes, trying to center himself, trying to focus on the energy that surrounded him. For a moment, he felt disconnected from everything, disconnected from the planet, from Elira, from himself. But then, slowly, a vision began to form. It was a memory, his memory. But it wasn't just any memory. It was something deeper, something buried beneath layers of time. He saw images of his past, his childhood, his training, the wars he had fought. But there was something else, something more ancient, hidden within the recesses of his mind. A vision of a planet, this planet, and its history. He saw the alien beings who had lived here long before him, and he saw the connection between them and humanity. A connection that stretched across time, across the stars, uniting them in a way that Max could never have imagined. The vision faded and Max opened his eyes, gasping for air. The energy in the room was gone, leaving him with a sense of quiet, of understanding. Elira was watching him, her expression still unreadable. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she asked. Max nodded slowly. "I saw. A connection between us and this planet, between humanity and whatever this place was." Elira's lips curled into a small smile. "You are the answer, Max, you're kind. You are the ones who were always meant to take this planet's place in the stars. The trials, the judgment, it was all to see if you were ready. And now you are." Max looked around at the towering statues, at the glowing platform beneath him. The truth was starting to settle in, but there was still so much he didn't understand. But why me? Why not someone else? Elira's eyes softened, the faintest flicker of something human crossing her face. "Because you're the one who survived, you proved yourself worthy." Max took a deep breath. His mind was spinning, but one thing was clear. His survival on this planet wasn't just about living. It was about something much bigger. And whatever lay ahead, whatever this planet had in store for him, he knew that his journey had only just begun. Max stood in the heart of the ancient temple, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The vision, the connection to the planet, the strange alien energy that had surrounded him. It all swirled in his mind like a storm, pulling him in 1,000 directions. He had always known that humanity had a place in the universe, but this was something completely different. He wasn't just part of the cosmos. He was part of something much older, much deeper, something that connected him to the very core of this alien world. Elira's eyes never left him as he stood there, trying to make sense of what he had just experienced. Her expression was still unreadable, but Max could feel the weight of her gaze. She had known this, all of it, before he had. She had seen the truth long ago, and now it was his turn to face it. "You're silent," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the vast emptiness of the temple. "What are you thinking?" Max didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked down at the glowing platform beneath his feet. The energy that had enveloped him moments ago seemed to linger, like an invisible hand brushing against his skin, urging him to understand more. The connection, the vision, it was all tied together. But why? And why him? Why had he been chosen? "I'm trying to understand," Max finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've seen the vision, I've felt the power of this place, but what does it mean for me, for humanity? What do we do with this knowledge?" Elira was quiet for a moment, her eyes drifting toward the intricate carvings on the walls. "It means that you are ready to ascend, Max. You are ready to claim your place in the stars." Max shook his head, confusion still clouding his thoughts. "Ascend? What does that even mean? How am I supposed to take humanity's place in the universe?" Elira turned to face him fully now, her gaze steady and sure. "The trials you faced weren't just tests of strength or survival. They were tests of readiness. The world, this planet, has been waiting for a new era. For a new race to take its place, and that race, Max, is humanity." Max's heart skipped a beat. "You're saying we're supposed to take over this planet, replace the aliens who once lived here?" Elira nodded. "Not just this planet, but many others. The vision you saw, the connection between your kind and this place, it is the key to a much greater destiny. This planet was never meant to stay isolated. It was meant to join with the stars, to become part of something larger. And now, it is your turn to fulfill that purpose." Max felt the ground beneath his feet shift, as though the very planet itself was reacting to Elira's words. The energy in the room pulsed once more, strong and undeniable. He was beginning to understand, but it wasn't easy. The weight of the responsibility that Elira was placing on his shoulders was immense. Could humanity really take such a place? Could they step into the shoes of an ancient race and lead the galaxy? I don't know if I'm ready, Max admitted, his voice heavy. This is too much. I'm just one person. I can't lead an entire race. I can't take humanity's place among the stars. Elira stepped closer, her eyes softening for the first time. You are not alone, Max. You never were. The trials you faced, they were not just for you. They were for all of humanity. The strength, the resilience, the will to survive, you carry all of those traits within you, and they are what will guide you forward. Max looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always thought of survival as an individual thing. A matter of fighting, of staying alive at all costs. But now, he was beginning to see that it was about more than just him. It was about humanity as a whole, about what they could achieve if they worked together, if they embraced their destiny. Then what do I do now? Max asked, his voice steadier than before. Elira didn't hesitate. You begin. You lead humanity to this world, to this place of power. You teach them what you have learned here. You show them the strength of unity, of survival, of purpose. And when the time is right, you will join with the stars. You will lead humanity into the future. Max felt a surge of determination rise within him. The vision, the trials, it had all been building to this moment. He didn't know how he would do it, but he knew that he had to. For humanity, for the future, this planet was just the beginning. The universe was vast, and humanity's place within it was waiting to be claimed. I'll do it, Max said, his voice filled with resolve. I'll lead them. Elira's gaze softened, and she gave him a small nod. I knew you would, but remember, Max, this is not just about survival, it's about growth. It's about understanding the true potential of your kind. You mustn't forget that. Max nodded, his mind racing with the possibilities. The weight of his new responsibility hung heavy on his shoulders, but for the first time he felt ready to carry it. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a leader, a guide for humanity's future. As he turned to leave the temple, Elira followed him silently, her presence like a shadow, a reminder of everything he had learned. The ancient structure behind them began to fade into the distance, but Max knew that the journey ahead was only just beginning. He didn't know what the future held or what challenges they would face, but he knew one thing for certain: humanity was ready for the stars, and he would be the one to lead them there. The trials were over. The true journey had just begun.